Our location is Westbury, a large town and a busy location on the main line between Hicksville and Mineola. Westbound set of M7s are going to witness the rush hour in this area and capture the diesel and electric MU trains that pass by, and there are many of them. The only diesels you won't see through here are the Oyster Bay trains. Westbury Station for rail service opened in 1837, and there have been a whole slew of stations built here. Torn down and new ones built and remodeled. This is the latest version. It's a busy town in Nassau County on the main line between Hicksville and Mineola. It's about 24 miles east of Manhattan. Gorgeous day this August 29th, 2019. Pleasant, crisp air, about 80 degrees, low humidity. Couldn't ask for a better late August day. Westbury sees traffic mainly, well, the MU traffic goes to Ronkonkoma and Huntington primarily, and you'll see diesel rush hour trains that go to Port Jefferson. You'll see some to Patchogue, Spionk, and Montauk. Good mix of electrics and diesel trains. East of the station here in Westbury is School Street. That's one of the main interests of me coming here today. That's one of the last of the railroad crossings on this main line stretch from Floral Park to Hicksville. They've already eliminated a couple of them, and it's just a matter of time before they eliminate this one and a couple in Mineola. That crossing was the scene of a terrible wreck in February of this year. An eastbound train departing out of Westbury slammed into a truck at that crossing, and the truck's wreckage flew into the westbound track, and a westbound had hit the truck again and derailed and slammed into the east end of the platform here, the westbound side. It was a terrible wreck. Took a little while to clean it up. And his next stop will be Hicksville, a set of Bombardier M7 cars. The M9s are due to be put into revenue service any day now. They were supposed to be tomorrow put into service, but it's been postponed at least until next week. That wreck I spoke of, that westbound that crashed into the east end of the westbound platform, tore up the platform pretty well. In fact, those foundations you see what held the platform, and there isn't any platform there now. And at 5:03 p.m. we have a westbound coming. He won't be stopping here. He's approaching the School Street crossing. That was a westbound set of Bud M3 cars. They're going to be replaced by the M9s, but it'll be a while before they're all gone. Approaching at 5:05 is train 658 en route from Penn Station, New York to Port Jefferson with a dual mode set. And his next stop will be Hicksville in a few minutes. Comes another westbound, will be blowing by at 5:07. And right away is an eastbound that's going to be going right by here at 5:08. They're in the process of triple tracking this line from Floral Park to Hicksville. Don't see any indication of any work done right here. That eastbound is headed for Ronkonkoma. Approaching now at 5:23 is train 2778 en route from Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City to Patchogue. This train should just have a simple DE30 AC, straight diesel, and a few cars. Speed limit through here for electrics is 80 miles an hour. And approaching westbound at 5:28 is train 655 en route from Port Jefferson to Jamaica. This will be the only westbound diesel train we will see. Approaching at 5:35 is train 1715 en route from Huntington to Penn Station, New York. Be stopping to pick up passengers. And he's heading off to Jamaica and New York City. And that conductor may have a sore arm tomorrow morning. Here we got an eastbound MU that should be flying through at 5:44. Trains out of Penn Station are running about 15 to 20 minutes late due to a track condition in the East River tunnels. Here's an M3 set. And approaching now at 5:47. He's running a little bit late tonight because of that track condition. This train 660, a dual mode set between Penn Station, New York, Port Jefferson. He's about to go over the hump which crosses over Post Avenue. And that's our second out of 3 dual mode sets. Train 2740 from Penn Station to Spionk will be the last one. All right, next up at 5:53 is train 662 en route from Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City to Port Jefferson. Because he wasn't running out of Penn Station, he's more closer to schedule. And this train will have Hogger Joe at the throttle. Good old Joe. Yeah, DE 30 AC number 411 on the point. Within minutes, train 2740 should be coming through from Penn Station, New York to Spionk. Here he comes. And he'll be chasing 662 to Hicksville, not much further. And we'll spend the rest of the rush hour here at the School Street crossing, just east of the Westbury platform. Next time I come to this town, this crossing may be gone. And approaching at 6:07, he's running about 20 minutes late, is train 2354. Right from New York to Farmingdale. He just pulled out of the station and he's on track number 1. And on track number 1, we have a train stopped, headed for Huntington, train 1728. And he departed Westbury at 6:11 p.m. And this is the time of the evening where a lot of flyers go by. That one was heading east. And that was a Huntington-bound train. Approaching now is train 2070, the Ronkonkoma Rocket, from Penn Station to Ronkonkoma, limited stop express. One of the fastest trains on the railroad. At Penn Station, he makes Hicksville the first stop, then Brentwood, Central Islip, and Ronkonkoma. And we got some maintenance away people working on the crossing. And 627, that's train 664, en route from Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City to Port Jefferson. We should see 3 more eastbound diesel trains before I leave. .29 p.m. That was a flying M7 set bound for Hicksville. In the station on track 1 is train 1256 en route from New York to Hicksville. Ooh, as 1256 pulled out, racing east on track number 2 is a set of 12 Bud M3s. This time of night there's not many westbound trains, so they use both tracks for eastbounds. He'll pass him up in no time. And chasing 1256 on number 2 track was 2072 from Penn Station, New York to Ronkonkoma with those Bud M3s built in the 1980s. That weedy old siding on the south side of the main is where the 3rd track is going to be installed. It'll look a lot better than that one. That eastbound was out at 6:40 p.m. Should have train 2716 coming by shortly en route from Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City, all the way out to the end of the South Fork, some 117 miles away in Montauk. And that was 2074 en route from Atlantic Terminal, Brooklyn to Ronkonkoma at 6:42. And 6:44, here comes the Montauk train, 2716. Approaching at 6:52 is the Devil's train, train 666 from Hunters Point Avenue to Port Jeff. It's all right. And at 6:54 p.m. on this gorgeous evening, I'm going to catch train 1717 from Huntington to New York City. Not just yet. He should be right behind this equipment maneuver. 1717 train number from Huntington to New York City. And approaching now is train 1717 from Huntington to New York. He'll be stopping at Westbury to pick up passengers. And a long cut of M7s, 12 of them, with a considerate crew waiting for that straggler. Westbound equipment at 7:04. Approaching at 7:07 is train 1734 en route from New York to Huntington. And before he arrives here, a westbound express will go through. And that train is passing over Post Avenue, which is the main street through downtown Westbury. And train 1734 is approaching at 7:08 as the sun is beginning to set. It's almost Labor Day weekend, almost September 1st. And the sun sets a lot earlier now than it does around the 1st of July.
Please stand behind the yellow line and stop again when boarding.
And the westbounds are running with abandon right now. And he's off to Huntington, and right on his block is the last diesel train eastbound of the rush hour. Train 668 en route from Hunters Point Avenue to Port Jefferson. He'll be going kind of slow through here with a puny consist. And here he comes at 7:10. And that concludes a busy rush hour in Westbury. Today is a cloudy September 10th, 2019. We're located at Yaphank Station on the Long Island Railroad's main line east of Ronkonkoma. This section of the main line from Ronkonkoma to Greenport, which was reached in 1844, is probably one of the more rural railroad lines on the Long Island Railroad. It sees limited service. Not a lot of business, but it does see commuter trains between Ronkonkoma and Yaphank, Riverhead, and Greenport. No through service except Friday nights in the summertime. And we're here to catch New York and Atlantic freight train RS-70, which usually comes out here around this time of day, 11:30, 12 o'clock. He changes ends and then goes and switches the Brookhaven Rail Terminal just west of here before heading back to Pine Air. The siding here is a block limit station with hand-thrown switches on each end. This is YA block limit station. The YA, the call letters for Yaphank. Main line is pretty straight through here. Head straight east, past the old Camp Upton. That's where troops used to assemble before being shipped overseas. Nearby is Brookhaven Laboratory. Further east, the line goes to Manaville, Calverton, Riverhead, the county seat of Suffolk County, and then further out to Greenport. Greenport used to be a town which was part of a New York to Boston rail route. And it was very popular with a lot of people transferring from rail to ships at Greenport. But then when the railroad was extended from New York to Boston on the Connecticut side, the town dried up and became just a dead end. But it's a popular tourist town today, with ferries to and from Shelter Island nearby. Approaching now at 12:44, right on time, is train 250, the Ronkonkoma Greenport Scoot, stopping at Yaphank. And off she goes to Greenport. The next stop on that train will be the county seat of Suffolk County, Riverhead, and then Manatuck, Southold, and Greenport. This is called the main line, although it doesn't act like one. It's a very rural line, sees limited service. In fact, the Montauk branch was built to Montauk more than 50 years after Greenport was reached. Montauk was reached in 1898, and that line is much further out and sees more service. That's more worthy of being a main line than this section of track is. And approaching at 1:20 is New York and Atlantic train RS-70. He's going to be changing ends here and then switching Brookhaven Rail to the west of here a little ways. You're looking at an ex-Long Island Railroad GP38-2 number 271. And trailing is GP38-2 268. It's like RS-70 has some lumber loads to drop off at Georgia Pacific. And he's heading west over to Brookhaven Rail Terminal, where he'll set out his loads and pick up empties, and we'll catch this train, now symboled RS-71 westbound, catch him further on down the main line, heading back towards Pioneer Yard. Now further west on the main line in the electrified zone, which is Ronkonkoma westward, at the Central Islip Station. We'll catch New York and Atlantic's RS-71 heading back west to Pioneer Yard, just a few miles west of here. And approaching the Lowell Avenue crossing at 3:17 is train 2057, en route from Ronkonkoma to Penn Station, New York. Train 2054 from New York to Ronkonkoma should also be coming in at this time. And accelerating over the Lowell Avenue crossing at 3:20 is train 2054 en route to Ronkonkoma. That'll be his next stop. And at 3:34 p.m. approaching on the near track, track number 2, is New York and Atlantic train RS-71. He's en route from the Brookhaven Terminal out in Yaphank to Pioneer Yard, a flat switching yard where the flat switch cars for Western trains head into Fresh Pond Yard in Queens. The GP38-2 error on Long Island is not dead yet. When these engines were delivered to the railroad in mid-1970s, they performed excellent service and passenger service for the better part of 20 years. Traveling back with empties. All the lumber cars he had earlier were dropped off at Brookhaven Terminal. Today is Wednesday, September 11th, 2019. We're here at Mineola, a busy spot on the main line in Nassau County. Now, we're here to do something I've never done in my life. Observe the AM rush hour here. Here comes a westbound. There's venerable Nassau Tower, whose future is in question with the triple tracking project. They may either dismantle the tower or move it somewhere. The town is fighting to preserve the tower and move it to another area. It's not even sunrise yet. We're here to capture the morning rush hour at Mineola, which many say is much more impressive than the evening rush hour. And that's since it's early in the morning still. There aren't a lot of eastbounds that use the railroad at this point through here, so the dispatcher has more time to use both tracks for westbounds. And you can see a lot of overtakes and drag races. More so than the evening rush hour when the dispatcher uses both tracks for eastbounds. But there are far more westbounds in the evening rush hour than there are eastbounds in the morning rush hour. And also today a special train will be passing. Train 1621 from Huntington to Hunters Point Avenue in Long Island City. What's so special about it? It's the inaugural westbound run of the Kawasaki M9 cars. And 617, that was train 2006 from Penn Station to Ronkonkoma. We got a westbound right away. And that's train 2301 en route from Farmingdale to Penn Station, New York. A lot of expresses go through here in the morning rush hour. Diesel and electric, both tracks are used. Should be quite an entertaining period of time. Eastbound at 620. Looks like he's heading up the Oyster Bay branch. That's a deadhead equipment move heading up to Oyster Bay. Probably make up a rush hour train that'll be coming back later on. And an eastbound M7 equipment move by at 623. The sun is just about to come up. And we got a westbound at 627. Try to identify as many of these trains as I can, but with the density they run through here, it gets kind of difficult to do. The diesel trains I have a much easier time identifying. But I think this is train 2099 out of Hicksville for Penn Station, New York. Non-stop through Mineola. But M3s. but its days are starting to be numbered since the M9s are starting to run today. That frog those trains run over on number 1 track, the speed limit has been reduced from 80 to 70. They're going to upgrade that frog at a later date. And approaching now at 6:30 a.m. is train 503. This is the dual mode powered train that runs from Oyster Bay to Penn Station, New York. The only one on the Oyster Bay branch. And departing eastbound with M7s was a Huntington-bound train. 503 is not the only train on the Oyster Bay branch that runs to Penn Station in the morning rush hour. There is another train, an electric train that originates one station up on the branch at East Williston. Runs down in the morning, but there's oddly no PM rush hour MU back to East Williston. Looking east as we have a westbound approaching on number 1 track is a classic Pennsylvania Railroad style position light. Westbound set of Bud M3s en route to Penn Station, New York at 6:37. The old guard, the 1980s built Bud M3s. Time is 6:41, that's a Huntington-bound train. Approaching at 6:42 is train 1617, en route from Huntington to Penn Station. He'll be stopping at Mineola. More M3s. Watch an eastbound knock down the signal here at 6:43. Now the approach to Nassau interlocking, showing a slow approach. This is for a set of MU equipment that's going to Deadhead, to East Williston, to make up that revenue train that goes back to Penn Station, train 1501. Unusual to see an MU train going down the branch, but it happens once a day each way on weekdays. And there he goes, heading down the branch to the next station, East Williston. Back as recently as the 1960s, before the electrification to Huntington and Ronkonkoma, the only electric trains you saw here at Mineola were those East Williston trains. They ran several times a day each way on weekdays only, either between Penn Station and East Williston or Flatbush Avenue, Brooklyn and East Williston. Here comes train 605 from Port Jefferson to Penn Station at 6:52. That's the second of 4 dual-mode powertrains we'll see today. One more from Port Jeff and one from Spionk, although there are some equipment sets that have an engine on each end. This train, 605, years ago, was the train that the FL9s were used in revenue service on. Train 605 is one of the first through trains out of Port Jefferson to the New York area. Years ago, that was the train that tested the FL9s in revenue service. A Long Island Railroad classic. I can see multiple headlights coming down the main line from the east. And you've witnessed the flexibility the dispatcher has on this line this time of day, since there aren't a lot of eastbounds. Train on the near track was a Huntington to Atlantic Terminal train, followed by a Ronkonkoma to Penn Station train on number 1 track. Approaching now at 7:07 is train 607. Runs between Port Jefferson and Hunters Point Avenue in Long Island City. He'll stop at Mineola. Should have train 2401 from Westbury to Penn Station coming on the other track around the same time. Approaching at 7:12 is train 505, coming off the Oyster Bay branch en route from Oyster Bay to Jamaica. And that train was coming off Oyster Bay Branch Track 2 onto Mainline Track 2, heading for Jamaica. He does not stop at Mineola. Flying M3s westbound at 7:16 a.m. M9 should be coming pretty soon. At 7:18 a.m., there you have it, the first westbound revenue run of the Kawasaki M9 cars. They have all kinds of modern features. They have automated train announcements in a female voice. They have doors that you can push the buttons and you can walk between the cars. They have better armrests not to tear the seats, the clothing. There are electrical outlets at each seat. These things have slightly faster acceleration. They're going to get 202 of these cars, and they should eventually be populating the railroad throughout the late summer and fall and early winter. That runs from Huntington to Hunters Point Avenue, train 1621. And 7:27, that was train 609 en route from Port Jefferson to Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City. And at 7:30 a.m., that was the Lone Wolf. That was the lone East Williston to Penn Station electric train. The only electric revenue train that runs on the Oyster Bay branch, other than the dual mode train from Oyster Bay. But as far as being an MU, that is it. Westbound on the main line, number 2 track, doing the limit, 80 miles an hour, 7:33 a.m. .737 westbound on number 2 track. Like I said, the dispatcher uses both tracks much more to his advantage in the morning rush hour than in the evening. There aren't a lot of eastbound trains in the morning. And we're standing by the Willis Avenue grade crossing, and Willis Avenue crosses both the main line and the Oyster Bay branch at grade. We got a westbound at 7:40. Westbound set of Bud M3s. They generally run the M3s on weekdays. Weekends, you really have to look very hard to find an M3 train. And 7:43, that was train 2023. That's an express train from Ronkonkoma to New York. Makes limited stops. One of the fastest trains on the railroad. Got another westbound at 7:45. Approaching at 7:48 is our third dual mode set. This train 2737 en route from Spionk to Penn Station, New York. Train runs as a local from Spionk to Babylon and then non-stop to Jamaica and then New York. And we're now looking up the Oyster Bay branch at the Willis Avenue crossing. Note the position lights and the cantilever signal on Oyster Bay track number 1. And at 7:52, that was train 2023. Previous express was actually 2021. 2023 has a very fast schedule from Ronkonkoma to New York. An hour and 7 minutes. Stops at Ronkonkoma, Central Islip, and New York. And approaching at 7:56 is Long Island train 507 en route from Oyster Bay to Long Island City, Hunters Point Avenue. And all the double-decker cars are C3 cars built by Kawasaki. Westbound on the main line at 7:58. And approaching westbound at 8 o'clock, this train has a famous number. He's being slowed as train 507 from Oyster Bay to Long Island City is up ahead of him, and he's just pulling out of the Mineola station now. He'll be picking up speed. This is train 611, named after a famous steam locomotive from the Norfolk and Western. And that steam engine is at the Strasburg Railroad right now, and will be running trips and photo charters the end of this month, beginning of next month, and I plan to be on hand. This runs from Port Jefferson to Hunters Point Avenue. And that train has a rather fast schedule, although it wasn't moving very fast through here. Makes all stops from Port Jefferson to Syosset, and then he's non-stop to Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City. And 8:05 a.m. getting a little traffic jam on track number 1. That's train 1629. That's a hot shot, but that's not moving very fast. He's stuck behind traffic. Runs from Huntington to Penn Station. Makes all stops to Syosset, and then non-stop to Penn Station, New York. Should have train 2703 coming by on number 2 track and route from Montauk to Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City. Here we got a westbound at 8:10. This should be train 2703 en route from Montauk to Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City. This train is unusual in that it runs from Montauk branch points out east and makes stops on the main line, such as Hicksville and Mineola coming up. And DE30AC406 is shoving 6 cars, the maximum that one engine can handle on these push-pull trains. Over 6, you need another engine. That train was the old Cannonball. It was a rush hour train from Montauk to Hunters Point. Used to be train number 5. And we have an eastbound MU at 8:14. Eastbound deadhead equipment move. And coming right away westbound at 814 is train 613, en route from Port Jefferson to Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City. Like 2703, he makes stops at Hicksville and Mineola. And that train had 6 cars and a dual mode unit, actually a diesel engine on each end, DE30AC. That equipment makes up train 664 on its eastbound trip back to Port Jefferson in the evening. And at 8:20 a.m. we have a coagulation of M7 trains in front of venerable Nassau Tower. You really are kept hopping on this morning rush hour here. Trains are so numerous, I've just given up trying to identify some of them. The diesels are the one I'm most familiar with. And at 8:22, peeking around the curve up the Oyster Bay branch is train 509, en route from Oyster Bay to Hunters Point Avenue. 502 is due to go from Jamaica to Oyster Bay shortly. This guy's waiting for traffic before he moves west. Nice sunny, warm, somewhat humid morning here in Mineola. It's been most entertaining so far with the heavy train traffic. And here comes 509. The third rail on the Oyster Bay branch runs from here, Nassau interlocking, to a point about 1,000 feet east of the East Williston Station platform. There's a switch where the MU trains can reverse direction and switch tracks. And here comes 502 for Oyster Bay at 8:25. can see 502 knocking down the signal here. His next stop will be East Williston. And departing at 8:34 is train 606 en route from Jamaica to Port Jefferson, an unusual off-peak train running through from Jamaica. That horn sounds like the way I sounded when I had the Hong Kong flu many years ago. And at 8:39, that was train 2739 en route from Spionk to Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City. At 8:50 a.m., that was train 1612 en route from New York to Huntington. And at 8:53 a.m., partially obscured by that eastbound M7, that was train 615 en route from Port Jefferson to Hunters Point Avenue, Penn Station, New York. That's the last dual mode set of the rush hour. And coming down the Oyster Bay branch at 8:59 is train 511 from Oyster Bay to Hunters Point Avenue, Long Island City. Those C3 cars do not have the most pleasant sounding horns. They're rather ear-piercing. And 9:20, here's train 504 about to head on to the Oyster Bay branch. Yeah, the rush hour is pretty much over now. It's going to settle down into a normal off-peak pattern, which in itself is still quite busy. And at 9:37, departing eastbound out of Mineola is train 2014 from New York to Ronkonkoma with a brace of Bud M3s. There should be New York and Atlantic RS40 eastbound. Guess again, it was a work train with a couple of Long Island Railroad MP15ACs on each end. And departing east out of Mineola at 9:52 is another off-peak through Jamaica Port Jeff train, train 608. Should have a westbound 617 from Port Jeff to Jamaica coming too. And at 9:56, that was New York and Atlantic train RS40 out of Fresh Pond Yard. I'm told on Thursdays he goes to Cleats Lumber in Huntington, but they didn't look like lumber cars. Otherwise, he goes to a recyclable dealer in West Babylon, New York. All right, at 10:06 a.m., our last train in this most entertaining morning rush hour saga at Mineola is train 617, the last through train out of Port Jeff towards New York City. This runs from Port Jefferson to Jamaica. He'll be stopping in Mineola before he gets to Jamaica. And today is September 11th, 2019. We're at Babylon Station, the last stop on the electrified portion of the Montauk branch. We're here to catch train 190 from New York to Babylon, an express train, which will be running with the M9 cars this evening. It'll be the end of a busy day for the M9 cars. They've been running around the electrified territory of the railroad all day. And here comes train 190. He's coming in on track 1. I thought he was coming on track 3. That train just arrived from his 57-minute dash from Manhattan. The M9's finishing a hard day's work, with many more days of hard work to come. And departing at 11:40 is train 2746 en route to Spionk. That's the connection off of 190. And here's the front of the train sitting on track 3, car 9002 on the point.
On or off?
They're on.
You want them on or do you want them off? Is it better for,
No, it's good.
it's fine? Okay.
Beautiful cars. They smell good too. I can smell the interior coming out, that brand new smell. And these cars have destination signs on the front, like the M8s on Metro North do. And off he goes into the storage yard after a hard day's work. Our location is Woodside Station on the Long Island Railroad. This is a very busy station. 6 tracks go through here. 4 tracks of the main line and 2 tracks of the Port Washington branch, which diverge east of here. We're about 5 miles east of Penn Station, New York. All trains east out of Penn Station pass by here, as well as trains out of Hunters Point Avenue. So during the PM rush hour on this September 13th, 2019, should be non-stop action, multi-train scene. The overhead railway you see here is the New York City Subway number 7 train, which runs from Flushing, Queens into Manhattan. Between the railroad and the subway, countless trains pass through here. Westbound set of M3s heading around the curve. He'll be in Penn Station within 10 minutes. Note the color light signals at the west end of the platforms here, replacing position light signals. Very colorful. Kind of makes one get in the Christmas spirit. Huntington-bound train at 3:36. The rush hour hasn't quite started yet.
3:38 p.m. train to N Station. Please stand behind the yellow line and step over the gap when boarding. Attention Long Island Railroad customers. The 3:45 p.m. train to N Station is expected to arrive on track 1 in approximately 6 minutes.
See the heavy westbound action and considerable action on the subway line above. The number 7 train runs from Manhattan out to Flushing. This time of day they run both locals and expresses. The station serving Woodside is 61st Street, which serves both local and express trains. And 3:45 p.m. just out of Hunters Point Avenue is train 656 en route to Port Jefferson. Now at the east end of the platform on the main line, looking east at the color light signals. Got a westbound coming from Port Washington on the far track. Here comes train 1716 from New York to Huntington, stopping at Woodside. Westbound diesel equipment move. Well, that train was obliterated by a flying eastbound set of M3s. As a Flushing-bound 7 subway train pulls in, we got train 442 to Port Washington at 4 o'clock. And here comes train 862 to Long Beach. 403 it's due out of here. Next up is the 4:06 p.m. train to Ronkonkoma. This is a busy station. And soon the winter-only Cannonball, train 2710 en route from New York to Montauk should be passing by. His first stop will be West Hampton, way out east. That was train 140, bound for Babylon. Due out at 4:14. And here comes 2710 from Montauk at 4:18. Eastbounds on the main line for now are using tracks 4 and 2, but later on in the heart of the rush hour, they'll use track 1 also. 3 eastbound tracks, plus the Port Washington branch, number 2. Here comes 558 for Oyster Bay at 4:27. And a few minutes behind him, we should have 658 from Penn Station, New York to Port Jefferson. And about to knock the signal down on track 2 at 4:29 is train 658 from New York to Port Jefferson with a dual mode set. That's a New York bound equipment move coming off the Port Washington branch, track number 1. And the first train was a Great Neck bound train on the Port Washington branch, followed by a westbound heading for Penn. Rounding the sweeping curve, heading towards the junction of the Amtrak line from Boston. You can actually see Amtrak trains passing, rounding the curve towards Hellgate Bridge from here. And 4:37, that was train 2778 from Hunters Point Avenue to Patchogue. eastbound M3 Express at 440. And we witnessed train 439 departing Woodside Hangar for New York off the Port Washington branch. Got this eastbound on number 4, being passed up by an express on number 2. Well, that eastbound express was headed for Long Beach. We were on the platform between mainline track 3 and Port Washington track 2.
4:54 p.m. train to Far Rockaway is expected to arrive on track 4 in approximately 3 minutes.
And here you can hear the public address announcements telling you where the trains are going. And approaching at 4:51, this is train 2778 from Hunters Point Avenue to Patchogue. The previous diesel we saw was 2712 from Hunters Point Avenue to Montauk. And the west end of the Port Washington branch, track number 1, you get a great view of the sweeping curve west of the station and all the trains that'll be using it in the next hour. And 457, that's a Great Neck bound train that runs on the Port Washington branch. You'll be picking up passengers for Citi Field. There's a Met game tonight. You can get a good view of Amtrak trains from here too. Slightly above where the train rounded the curve, you can see some catenary poles. And here comes train 660 from New York to Port Jefferson. It's a little after 5 now. Around this time, a train is almost always visible here. Let's just sit here for a while and watch all the action here on the sweeping curve with 6 tracks. And that diesel you saw amidst all the MU action was train 560 from Hunters Point Avenue to Oyster Bay. And at 512 you saw an Acela Express heading for Boston. It's getting busy now. It's 5:17. We're in the heart of the rush hour. 519. Here comes train, whoa, 662 to Port Jefferson on the left and 2740 to Spionk on the right. Unfortunately, that classic drag race was obliterated by that westbound MU. Here we're back at the west end of track 4 on the main line. It's a cool evening. You almost need a jacket, but this is what I like it to be like in September. The railroad is definitely using tracks 1, 2, and 4 for eastbounds now, and you can definitely tell a difference in sound between the passing of an M7 train and an M3 train. Other than Jamaica, this is about the only place on the Long Island Railroad where you can theoretically see 6 trains moving at the same time. Actually 7 or 8 if you count Amtrak in both directions. M3 Mania. Those blue-shirted individuals are New York Mets fans. There's a game tonight against the Philadelphia Phillies, and they're waiting for a Port Washington branch train to Citi Field. The Long Island Railroad and the subway that goes over here both serve Citi Field.
Attention Long Island Railroad customers. The 5:42 a.m.
Some of those short-sleeve Mets fans are going to have a chilly night at the ballpark. This is a Great Neck-bound train. It's an upscale neighborhood in Nassau County. This train is full of commuters and Met fans. Mets have been on a roll lately. They just swept the Arizona Diamondbacks and they're playing the Phillies. Both the Mets and the Phillies are fighting to get a wild card spot in the National League. With so many trains here and so many angles, you can get a little artsy. departing at 5:46 is train 1256 en route to Hicksville. This train was rather infamous back in 1993. Colin Ferguson went on a shooting spree, killing a number of passengers. We got two Penn Station bound trains occupying Port Washington 1 and Main Line 3. This is the Long Island Railroad at its best. Here comes 664 to Port Jefferson. And today is a gorgeous September 20th, 2019. We're at another place on the Long Island Railroad, the end of another diesel line, a lightly traveled one, Oyster Bay, New York. Oyster Bay was founded in 1653, and this station was built when the railroad reached Oyster Bay in 1889 and remodeled in 1902. And this is the storage yard at Oyster Bay. As you can see, it's 4:30 in the afternoon on a weekday, and it's empty right now, but after the rush hour it'll be loaded with trains. At one time there was a turntable here to turn locomotives. And adjoining the railroad station is this beautiful park. Oyster Bay is the home of former President Teddy Roosevelt. Nearby is his mansion called Sagamore Hill. It's open to the public. And the park borders Oyster Bay Harbor. And at 4:48 p.m., train 556 just arrived from Jamaica, and he's going to be pulling into the storage yard. And approaching at 5:30 is train 568, en route from Hunters Point Avenue to Oyster Bay, coming down the hill into Oyster Bay. We're further west on the Oyster Bay branch in the upscale, beautiful neighborhood of Millneck. This is the old Millneck Station, which was built in 1912. It supposedly is a police station for the local police department. We're here to catch several trains, including a couple of run-bys by my friend Hogger Joe. I might add, this station was used in a scene in the movie Death Wish with Charles Bronson. This station is preserved the way it was back in the 1980s and 90s. The station was discontinued as a passenger stop in 1998. Low platform is still here, no fences. It's a beautiful wooded area. Approaching west is train 557 from Oyster Bay to Jamaica at 5:57. And his next stop will be Locust Valley. Section of the Oyster Bay branch between Oyster Bay and Locust Valley is the most scenic. And at 6:28, that was train 560 from Hunters Point Avenue to Oyster Bay with Hogger Joe at the throttle. He'll be coming back west in a few minutes to Jamaica. And that was train 559 en route from Oyster Bay to Jamaica with Hogger Joe at the throttle. Turned out to be a gorgeous day.